This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, Tortured for Christ. Our very special guest, Dr. Peter Hammond, the founder of Frontline Fellowship. Dr. Hammond, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you so much. Great to be back with you.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. Bit of a difficult show this evening in several ways. Dr. Hammond, I'd like to explore with you and have you share with us some of your profound and frightening and I think also experiences also of redemption. Let us begin. Let's start with you telling our audience about what exactly you do in your missionary work and how that led you into the hands of, let's say, bad people.
Yes, Jamie, I was brought up in Rhodesia, the last British colony in Africa, and we were at war from the time I was 5 years old, so we learned early on that you didn't go outside at night without first switching off the lights before you opened the door. You didn't switch a light on inside without closing the curtains. Our school teachers carried machine guns. There were ambushes. There was landmines on the farm roads just when you were going on normal school outing. So we were brought up in a country at war, and I took that as pretty normal. But at age 17, I was converted to Christ, and I immediately got involved in missions. Then my military call-up came up. We were at war at the time. It was the height of the Cold War. South Africa was facing the hot part of the Cold War. And so when I went in for my 2 years military service with the South African Defence Force, I started a Bible study and a prayer fellowship. And at that Bible study and prayer fellowship, we prayed through the night. We often were interceding for our neighboring countries, communist Mozambique, communist Angola. And so we'd be praying through Operation World. We realized a lot of the terrible needs in these countries. So the Lord really put a burden on my heart to start a mission of Christians from military background who'd go into these communist areas, help persecuted churches.
Dr. Hammond, when you became a Christian at the age of 17, what were you beforehand?
Well, I was brought up in an agnostic family. We were secular. We didn't go to church. We didn't even pray before meals, not even at Christmas. So we're a very secular family. My father had fought in the Second World War all 6 years in the Royal Artillery and the British Army. And he was very negatively affected by his experiences in the war and was negative, believed you couldn't believe in God. And so I was brought up with that idea. So I was radically converted at 17, called into missions, and my first mission field really was the army.
Okay. And so you began missionary work, correct?
Yes. In fact, as this Bible study and prayer fellowship developed in the army, I had been convicted to make a stand for Christ early. So on our first Sunday in the South African Army, I asked the chaplain if I could speak. I stood up and I turned to these 500-odd men who also had shaven heads and in the same brown uniforms. And I said to them, I love the Lord Jesus Christ with all my heart and soul, and I want to honor him during my next 2 years here. If anyone else feels the same, please see me afterwards. Let us start a Bible study and a prayer fellowship. And that's where our mission began. And so at the end, we had this group that had grown from 3 to 8 to 12 to 34 to 80 meeting on our last night. And we wanted to do something for our neighboring countries where we knew Christians were under fire. And so the Lord had made it very clear to me to launch this mission. So I was only 21 years old when I left the army, and I felt too young to start a mission, but we called it Frontline Fellowship, and we launched across the border on motorbikes, taking the Jesus film, 16mm projector film, and Bibles and New Testaments, Gospels in the local languages, Mozambique, Portuguese, Shango, and so on. And we began outreaches. And so I was smuggling Bibles for years into these areas before we actually got captured.
So just a second. Where were you smuggling Bibles into?
Mozambique and Angola. Those used to be Portuguese colonies in Portuguese East Africa, Portuguese West Africa. When Portugal went through a revolution in 1974, they just abandoned the African overseas possessions and they became communist. The Soviets poured in. This was the height of the Cold War, 1975. In came the Cubans, tens of thousands of Cuban troops at any one time in Angola and Mozambique. East Germans were under secret police. Russians were there, Russian warships in the harbor, and it was a very high escalation time of the Cold War.
Okay, so Mozambique, Angola during the Soviet era, during the Cold War, you are trying to bring Jesus into the communist world, correct?
That is correct. We were smuggling Bibles by the tens of thousands. I remember once in Mozambique, in Maputo harbor, I was handing out Russian New Testaments to Russian sailors. There were quite a lot there. And I just managed to put 4 New Testaments into different Russian sailors' hands, and I was feeling this is going well. And suddenly one big bear of a man bellowed something in great anger, came up to me, he picked me up over his head and he threw me into the harbor. And he threw the New Testament on top of me. So there was a lot of amusement too, but we were showing the Jesus film 16mm projector at night in different bombed out, burned out churches, and people coming to Christ. I was even baptizing some of our communist enemies to Christ who were converted.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. So let's get to now that you're captured the first time when you were doing your dangerous, risky missionary work under communism. What happened?
It was October 1987. I was 27 years old. We were going through Botswana, Zambia to Malawi, and from Malawi, which would be in the far north, we'd be able to come down into central and northern Mozambique, which was a very restricted area. And so as we crossed the border at Kazungula Ferry across the Zambezi River by a ferry, we were in Zambia, which then was run by communist dictator Kenneth Kaunda. He was dictator for about 27 years without an election, of course. And the police wanted bribes, and of course, on principle, we would not pay bribes. So they actually just arrested us and started to search our vehicle, strip search us. They came across vast quantities of Bibles, huge amounts of audiovisual gospel recordings materials, and camping equipment, including maps and compasses. This, they said, proved that we were spies. They wanted to know why we were taking Bibles into Mozambique. Mozambican Bibles weren't, it was illegal there. And I said, well, there's a lot of Mozambican refugees in Malawi, and of course we intended to minister amongst the refugee camps. That was our cover, and it was also true. There was a lot of Mozambicans that fled to Malawi. That did not impress them. So we were imprisoned in Livingston in the police cells, and then they kept us all night in pretty hideous conditions. We were attacked by swarms of mosquitoes. I counted 65 mosquito bites on 1 foot at the end of the night. We were stripped. We didn't have clothes. So we were in these stinking cells covered in human filth and just alive with mosquito bites. Our whole body is full of angry bites at the end. This is tropical area by the Zambezi River. Well, the next morning, we were dragged into the police cell, and they had a whole lot of my Frontline Fellowship Christian literature on the table. Now, I wasn't traveling with that. They must have gotten that from some other source, because we wouldn't travel with our mission literature with us. And they were starting to say, are you the same Peter Hammond who's written these articles? And I had to admit, yes. So pulling out my anti-communist literature and, communism, myth and reality, and the heart of Karl Marx and the heart of communism. And they are challenging me on this and what I wrote. And I said, am I here for something I've written or because I've broken any laws? Then they started slapping and punching me around and, don't talk back and answer the question. And before we knew it, we were being hooded, with sacks over the head, tied tight, and handcuffed, shackled, chained, and then being dragged out first into a parking lot apparently, and then into a truck. We were driving on good roads and we were driving on dirt roads, and you begin to wonder what's going to happen. You can't see a thing. Are they going to take us to the bush, shoot us, put us in a hole somewhere? Next thing, we could feel a flat surface, very flat surface. Now, their roads are always potholed, so I assumed we were on a tarmac. Next thing, sure enough, we'd taken up some stairs into an aircraft, could feel it's an aircraft. As I tried to lift my sack to see, the next thing I was punched and hit with rifle butts. Obviously, they were watching us carefully, so we couldn't try and look. And then the plane took off. Now we're starting to wonder, are they going to fly us to Mozambique or Angola, where we'd be in deep trouble? Zambia is a a socialist country right between Mozambique and Angola. And I knew I was wanted in Angola and Mozambique for what I'd written. So wondering, one of my other missionaries with me, there was 4 of us, was thinking, are they going to take us high and then throw us out the aircraft from 10,000 feet or something? Well, after about an hour's flight, we landed and we came out. And when they removed the hoods, we saw we were in Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, and we're outside the police headquarters. Well, after a few preliminaries, they marched us through the streets, barefoot, of course. They'd taken away our shoes. We were walking chained, and we were in quite a bad way. Of course, we'd been in a cell covered in human filth for the night before. And they were hitting us with rifle butts, prodding us with bayonets, parading us in the streets. We've captured these 4 missionaries. And so the people were jeering at us and throwing things. So at this point, we started to sing. I started singing, stand up for Jesus. This is the day that the Lord has made. Onward, Christian soldiers. A whole lot of great Christian hymns. And after a while, the throwing of things at us and the abuse stopped. It died down. I think the people felt ashamed. And we came to this huge prison, Lusaka Central Prison, massive gates, but they just opened a little door and we had to crouch through. And as we came into Lusaka Central Prison, this is a prison the British built for about 80 people. There were 1,200 crammed in there. And we went into this courtyard and you just saw people everywhere and they were in the most hideous conditions. There was no plumbing, no electricity in this prison. They brought us, it was starting to get dark, and they brought us into this one cell, and as I opened the door, this cell was just filled with people. It was pitch dark, and there's no electricity. And they said, these are white terrorists responsible for the deaths of millions. And they pushed us into the cell and closed the door behind us, and it was pitch dark.
Sounds very frightening, Dr. Hammond. So what happened? You were thrown in there and...
Well, we had to make friends very quickly. So I started to preach the gospel, and I found out there were other Christians in the cell. Now, we're talking about cells that were 25 feet by 15 feet, and there would be 60 to 65 people in every cell. No plumbing, no electricity, obviously no bedding or anything like that, no furniture. And imagine putting 1,200 people in a prison without any plumbing, without any electricity. All the water's got to be carried in buckets. All the filth has to be carried out in buckets. It was pretty hideous. Well, we started to preach, and of course we had no Bibles. It all had to be from what we remembered. But every day I had the chance to minister to the 1,200 prisoners in the main open quadrangle, and then at night when they put us in about 5 through till about 8 in the morning, we'd be doing Bible studies with the people in our cells. 6 times they'd come and drag me off for interrogations, and these interrogations would last an average of 6 hours each. And they said to us, now you have a British passport, we cannot do to you what we do to our citizens, because we know we'll have to at some stage release you back to your people, but we know what you hate. So they started waterboarding. Just heads in buckets of water, heads in buckets of urine, heads in buckets of filth and excrement, suffocating and punching, of course, beating. But they knew where to punch, in the stomach where they couldn't leave major bruises and injuries. And we were fortunate because others in our prison cell who were Zambians, they had red-hot pokers pushed into them. They had pussy sores. People had their fingernails and toenails ripped out, teeth pulled out, and so on. So we were just getting filthy and waterboarding, suffocating treatment.
Dr. Hammond, was this simply just sadistic treatment for its own good and there was nothing you could do? Or did they want you to say something?
Oh, no, there was definite purpose. They wanted to know who our contacts were in Mozambique, who the pastors were in the underground church. They wanted to know our access routes, our crossing points. They wanted to know the structure, the network. And of course, we could not in any way endanger the lives of the people there. So we had to lead them down garden paths, say anything but, or just in many cases, refuse to answer. And that's when the brutal treatment occurred. And because I was the leader of the team, I got interrogated the most and the most severely because they knew I had the information and they desperately wanted out of me.
Dr. Hammond, now let's move over to your ministry into the Muslim world. There was ministry into the communist world, and you were tortured for that and persecuted. Tell us, and please, we're running out of time. Tell us about how you tried to bring the message of Jesus Christ into the Islamic world, and then what happened to you when you were in that activity?
Yes, well, after a couple of prison experiences, interrogations in communist countries in southern and central Africa, the wars ended here about 1994. So in 1994, I was moving north and the Rwandan Holocaust occurred. We were involved in there, walking amongst the corpses. In fact, it's 22 years ago that the Holocaust in Rwanda occurred, and this very month. And when I was in Rwanda ministering to the persecuted church there, I heard about the persecution in Sudan. So I managed to hitchhike. I didn't have a vehicle there at the time, up into Sudan, and I discovered churches being burned, Christians being attacked, hideous things happening. And so Sudan quickly became our main mission field. And that, of course, was the largest country in Africa at the time. And it was also an officially Islamic country waging jihad against the Christian South. Well, we smuggled in hundreds of thousands of Bibles, established schools, churches, and all the while doing this, we were getting bombed. 10 times the Muslim government bombed our mission station at Mundri. They came in, and we had 140 bombs dropped on our mission base, which had no military significance. It had just a church, a chapel, a clinic, a library. It was a very simple mission base, a school and so on. And they came in these air raids. We had Antonovs, we had MiGs and Mi-8, and we even had low-flying supersonic jet MiGs bombing us, as well as the high-flying Antonovs. Well, during this time, I got captured, and they were threatening to put us against the wall and shoot us. And so there was the firing squad threats. The Sudan government had actually published on the government of Sudan Ministry of Foreign Affairs official website, Peter Hammond should expect to be shot on sight. He should expect to be bombed every time he comes to Sudan. And they even gave a reason. They said his writings make him an enemy of the state.
Just a second. Who exactly took you captive?
The National Islamic Front government used an informant to inform the SPLA rebels in the south that I was working for Al-Qaeda and for Osama bin Laden, and that I was working for the Arab government to overthrow them. So during the war, I traveled to a part of the SPLA rebel-controlled area where they didn't know us and where they spoke a different language, a different tribal group. And they had been given this disinformation that we were working for the Arabs. And so actually it was some of the rebels of the SPLA who took us captive believing this disinformation. And when I was telling, I've written a Faith That Defines Sudan book, and this chap says, I can't read. Here's a military intelligence major. And they were threatening us. And I said, but I'm the best friend of South Sudan. I've been bringing people to make films. We've been exposing Sudan in the Holocaust, terrorism and persecution, Islamic jihad. Look at these films we brought. They said, we're not interested. You're going to be put against a wall in the morning and shot. So actually, while the Arabs couldn't get their hands on us, except by bombing us from high points because we were in the rebel areas, they tried to convince a group of rebels to actually have us shot for being traitors for serving the Arabs. So it was a very devious and dangerous few weeks that we had there.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. And how did you get out of that situation?
Obviously, by prayer. In every case, it's a matter of the Lord's people interceding, prayer and pressure. And it's a matter of the Lord opening prison doors and setting the captives free. We had a tremendous rainstorm. It was a torrential monsoon-type rain. And in that rain, where all the guards are basically around the fire trying to keep themselves warm and dry, we were able to escape. And we were able to get a missionary aviation fellowship plane in that managed to fly us out, which in the middle of the torrential rain was not easy, but very brave pilots and perfect timing. So we managed to get out of there. And later, when the head of the SPLA, John Garang, learned about it, he was horrified and assured us that such things wouldn't happen again. But the government of Sudan has sent us death threats. We have received fatwas for writing the book Slavery, Terrorism, Islam, and Faith and Defiance Sudan. We've received death threats by phone, by fax. We've had Muslims at our gate threatening us. We've had our local police investigating and seeking to prosecute these death threats from Muslims against us for our missionary work into the Muslim world.
Okay, so let's just catch up here. There was missionary work into the communist world, and that continues. And this attempt of yours to bring Christ to the Muslim world, you're getting a huge backlash to that. Just expand a little bit in terms of what these threats entail, what this abuse entails.
In 2005, when I produced the book Slavery, Terrorism and Islam, Understanding the Historic Threat and the Historic Roots and the Contemporary Threat, we start to receive death threat fatwas. A fatwa is a military Muslim death threat, which is a legally binding requirement that every Muslim on earth is obligated to kill the object of a fatwa. So I got these fatwas received in writing, electronically and by fax as well as by letter in the post, and we had Muslims saying in this fatwa it was, we will not just kill you, we are going to cut you to pieces while you're alive, feed your body parts in front of your eyes to dogs and hyenas, and all that sort of things. They dragged it out, and basically it's been an intimidation threat, and we've seen Muslims casing our joints and trying to prepare us for an attack.
Dr. Hammond, please, very briefly, because we're out of time. If Islam is supposedly a religion of peace, why this violence? Why this intolerance towards the message of another religion, towards the message of Jesus Christ? Why the death threats? Why the attempt to kill you?
Well, when Muslims say peace, they are meaning submission to Islam. They don't exactly mean the same thing as we do with the same words. And so when they say Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance, but what they mean is submission to Islam. And they've divided the whole world into the Dar al-Islam, the place of submission to Islam, and Dar al-Harab, the house of war. So anyone who's not in submission to Islam is a legitimate military threat. So when they say we believe in peace, what they're meaning is submission and subjection to Islam.
Dr. Hammond, have you been afraid? Are you not scared? How do you cope with this emotionally? Do you not have fear?
No, of course one does have concerns, and sometimes fear does rear its ugly head. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And it's absolutely important for us to trust the Lord, which means obviously we take all the legitimate precautions we can. We've hardened the target. We have bomb-proofed our windows. We have bomb-proofed our car windows. We've trained our staff. We have bomb drills. We're armed. We get the shooting range regularly. We do drills at our mission and our family. So, no, we are not going to let the intimidation and the threat stop us from doing what God has called us to do. But we do what we can. We trust God to do what we cannot.
Dr. Hammond, and you are ready to give your life. And if your life is taken in this missionary work that you do, you see it also as a part of your mission and as a sacrifice. Are you ready to give your life? You're not afraid to give your life?
Well, no. I've had over 140 missions behind enemy lines in the last 34 years, and any one of those could have been the last. So obviously, yes, we have to be willing to live as Christ, to die as gain. And plainly, it's our calling as missionaries. We have to be willing to pay the price. Now, I'm amazed that we've survived so many years of missionary work behind the lines. I have undertaken over 14,000 services in restricted access areas, and we keep coming back. It's just God's grace and mercy. So, no, if today's the last day, then praise God, because to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Dr. Hammond, you're an incredible man, doing incredible things. Tremendous love for you at the Glazov Gang. Support for everything that you do. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Praise God for your stand. Keep faithful, keep firm. We look forward to you winning America back to Christ.
Thank you. And our guest this evening, Dr. Peter Hammond from Frontline Fellowship. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. We'll see you on the next edition. Good night.